EDB contributed over 30 patches for Postgres 18. We've had more people contribute to Postgres 18 than for any other Postgres release in EDB's history. And so we decided to talk to the people that made the patches happen. Like in this video, where we'll cover how the extension control path patch for Postgres 18 introduces a cloud-native way to make extensions available in Postgres deployments. And we'll just generally talk about, like what goes into a release and how release planning happens.
All right, I'll introduce myself. I'm Peter Eisentraut. I live in Germany. I've been a Postgres contributor for a long time, going on 25 years now, I believe. Right now, I work at EDB, doing Postgres development, and I'm a committer, and I'm also work with the team to enable their contributions to Postgres and their growth as Postgres developers.
I'm Matheus Alcantara. I'm based on Brazil. I'm recently new at Postgres community. I've joined EDB November of last year. I've been working as a programmer for 8 years. I've read some patches, small patches on Postgres before joining EDB, like tests and documentation, but I've been working more closely and with the community and with the open source. And now that I've been working on DB. So yeah.
So can you tell me something about the extension control path patch and what it means for Postgres? Maybe why you got involved with working on the patch?
Yeah, so this had a bit of an interesting history. It's not something I picked up by myself, but there were a few different people asked me about some issue they had with integrating whatever they were working on with extensions in a particular way. And one example was that the people from the Cloud Native Postgres team approached me about how they wanted to integrate extensions. And we had the Debian packager also had a seemingly related problem, and also someone from the macOS packaging, the Postgres.app team. And it sort of appeared we were standing around at the PostgreSQL Europe conference last year, and then someone overheard, and we were all sort of then standing together and figured a lot of these people had the same problem, that they couldn't attach their extensions to their main server in the way they wanted because they had immutable base images of some kind and needed to attach extensions in a non-standard path, and it was sort of stuck and asked me, I guess, as a sort of more experienced developer of what we could do about it. And so that's how I got involved. So that was sort of late last year, and then I started hacking on that a little bit. And I guess at some point I handed it over to Matheus. I'm not exactly sure how that happened. Maybe I got sort of distracted and asked Matheus see if he could test it a little bit, and then he ran with it. How did that happen, Matheus? Do you remember this?
Yeah, the first versions of the patch, there's some to-dos. So I started working on these to-dos, like refactoring the PG available extension, something like that, if helper functions that list the extensions. There's some to-dos on this area. So I started working on these, and there started to appear some bugs that I've also helped on that. So yeah, that's what was basically.
And you also built out the test coverage for this patch,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly. So he basically ran with it. I did all the easy work at the beginning and left comments in the code about to do here, to do there, and then Matheus finished everything. He did a super good job.
I just wanted to say, like, to-dos sound really nice. For I got a half-baked patch and I had to do, there was a lot to be finished still. All right, really cool. And then what other projects were you involved with for the Postgres 18 release as a patch author or otherwise?
Okay, I can mention two I was spending most time on. The one is virtual generated columns. That's a feature I've been sort of working on in essence for many years. I've worked on generated columns, I think for Postgres 12 or so, and we only finished at the time store generated columns. And I always wanted to finish virtual generated columns. I had sort of a third of the work sort of lying around, and at some point I said, like, now I want to finish it. It seems like an important and popular feature that people want, that they know from other database systems. So I wanted to finish that, and that was also, and we did finish it. So Also, thanks to the help of several other people in the community and colleagues at EB. And the other one is a somewhat obscure feature to change or enhance the index access method APIs to allow more kinds of indexes. And this is something that we're still, we put the base of this work into Postgres 18, and now we're actually doing some work to actually make use of that. Matthias, what will you work?
Yeah, I've also worked on a feature that basically enables the usage of the Scrum authentication for the foreign data wrappers. So previously, the users should set the password on the user mapping to connect a Postgres server with a foreign server. So this Scrum pass-through feature enables to use the same Scrum authentication used by the client with the foreign server. So there's no need to use more the password on the user mapping. So you don't need to store the route password on Postgres tables. So there's again on security about that. And I also working on the adoption of the read streaming API on the AM check extension. This read streaming API enables the usage of the synchronous IO that it's due on Postgres 18 as well. So I've worked on the AM check extension and also reviewed for the auto pre-warm extension. So these extensions use this new async IO async IO interface for Postgres 18.
Yeah, the Scrum pass-through work is very important really for PostgreSQL user because it avoids, you have full strength authentication, but you don't need to store plain text passwords, which is just super important. And a lot of users and customers have contacted us like this is not allowed by our, rules. Is there something we can do about it? And so hopefully we can have something for them now to fix that.
What are some of the stuff that you have worked on? Is some of the stuff that is coming out with 18 that you're really interested in or looking forward to?
I think a lot of people are looking forward to async IO. Matheus already mentioned that. I think this is an interesting feature. It probably doesn't do much in Postgres 18. I think there's been some reports of good performance improvements in certain use cases, but I see it more as a foundation, similar to how we had the infrastructure for parallelism many, releases and years ago, which did a little bit, but it gave an API and infrastructure, and then people can go around and edit here and edit there. And I think Matheus already gave an example, right? He worked completely independently and said, like, I can edit here, and that's a really exciting feature or sort of development to have, that you put something in place and a lot of people can work with it in different ways. So that's something really exciting for me as a more developer. I don't know really what the user impact will be, but as a developer, for the future, I think this is very interesting. A second thing I'm quite interested in, maybe flying a little bit under the radar, but there's been a lot of interesting work done in PG upgrade to make upgrades faster and speed up the file copies with some new nice tricks and things like that. So I think has not maybe gotten the real top level attention, but a lot of people use PG upgrade obviously. So I think there's been a lot of sort of nice little detail work being done there to make that faster and more robust.
Is anything else you're looking forward to?
Yeah.
Or the same stuff, could be the same stuff.
Yeah, the async IO, it's very interesting feature. And there's also I knew that I think that it's interesting that it's the UUID v7. So I think that this is very interesting because UUID v7 preserves the ordering of the UIDs. So the UIDs is generated orderly. So this is better for B3 indexes. So it's not more random like before or any previous one. So yeah, I think that this B7 version of UID it's very interesting for backend applications or something like that.
Nice. What is it like to work on open source within a company? I'm curious because I guess sometimes working on open source can be pretty lonely, but if there is other colleagues that work on open source stuff as well, that might be really nice. Do you, have frequent meetings or otherwise, so to make sure that you also have some human contact?
I don't know, Matheus, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can start. For me, it's new yet because I'm still joining the community. So I'm still learning a lot about how it's work professionally with open source. But it has been very interesting because we work with a lot of different people here at the company and at the community with different time zones, different thoughts, and all of those things. It's different from what uh, usual working on private projects is. So there's a lot of discussions, opinions that we discuss on the list. So yeah, it's been very very interesting, but it's very good also.
Yeah, I think for me, I would always say typing in the code is half the work. The other half is all the other things, you know, organizing the work, of course, in a sort of management kind of way, but also in a sort of coming up with ideas and that kind of thing, and interfacing with customers and the general user base, and figuring out what to do, and then interfacing with developers in the community and building trust relationships with them and understanding what their priorities are, and seeing how your planned work would intersect with them, and so on. And a lot of this has been built up over the years, through various interactions, on the mailing list, and also on our personal meetings. And yeah, it's an important thing that the participants can handle that kind of work, but also, we have put, and we're putting infrastructure in place, at EDB and also in the community in general to support that kind of work, right? By organizing conferences and by having, sort of team meetings and team building events and check-ins with people and all these kind of things. So it is a lot of work to make that work, really. Actual development work is just a part of that.
Yeah, I love that you said 50-50, but probably like the latter part, the non-code part is more, as it actually does take more time or is harder, question mark. You also mentioned that you had a chat about the extension control path patch, or like the idea of doing something at PGConf Europe last year. So does that happen a lot where people just come together and you discuss this? Because sometimes it's easier to discuss this when you see each other face to face than over the mailing list, or doesn't
Yeah,
really matter?
sometimes you need that, right? Because it's the people who had the problem didn't know what the solution would be. And we figured it out that this kind of thing could be a solution. And then we kind of ran with that. Sometimes you have an idea just on your own, and it's obviously a good idea, and you just write the code and you go. But, the sort of the complex and more difficult topics you need to talk about with people over and over again, sometimes, repeatedly over years, perhaps, to come to an understanding of where people see things going and how what you want to do intersects with that, right? So just to maybe pick an example, it's looking really into the future, right? There is some work and some planning going on in converting Postgres to a multi-threaded architecture. And that's discussions have been going on for years, and you just iterate on that until you come to some kind of idea of what is actionable. And that's kind of what some of us are working on now.
So, for instance, there is the developer meeting at PGConf Dev. Is that some place where you agree to get together and talk about this stuff, or does it happen in the hallway track, or like what does this look like?
It's a combination of this, and this is part of the work of, we go to these conferences. They're obviously supposed to be enjoyable and fun, but it's also work, and you have to think about what is the right forum, right? Sometimes it's just the hallway track. A lot of these things start in the hallway track, and then maybe it becomes a presentation, or it becomes an on-conference session, or some kind of poster or whatever. There's different options, and that people are sort of developing nowadays. So that's part of the job, to figure out how to sort of figure, build support for your project and promote your project. And then ultimately also when you're done, promote and present the work that you finished. So that's what these different events are for.
Yeah, and then maybe also because not every open source project sort of organizes around something like a mailing list. So how do you make sure that what you discuss at a conference like that, or when you get together face to face, that it make sure that it's accessible for other people and they can also jump on the topic and lend their ideas as well?
Yeah, that's important. So I think generally what is discussed at developer meetings and developer conference type of events gets them posted into the Postgres wiki. So you have pretty good records over the years of what was discussed when, and then sometimes also summaries get posted to an appropriate mailing list when someone, I would maybe just write like, oh, this is what was discussed. And for the people who weren't there, this is what we're thinking. And so you have a record on, the forums that everybody has access to. That's important, right? Not everybody can go to these meetings. They're important, but not everybody has the chance to go. So you obviously have to keep people in the loop. That's also important.
It's a lot of communicating.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the work, right? That's what we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that there might be like a whole subset of engineers that didn't necessarily expect that is such a large part of the job.
Yeah. I don't think that's particular to Postgres or open source development. I think this is probably just the job of being a software developer.
I love that. I mean, I 100% agree with you, but still, I think that a lot of people didn't necessarily expect that, when they can also be sort of like a lone wolf developer working on their stuff. So, yeah.
Matheus, did you expect that?
Yeah, absolutely not. We always need to be discussing something. So sometimes we spend whole day just discussing, talking, and then just later we get some part of the code. So yeah, conversation is very important.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I think you're operating on a very different timeline than maybe some of your colleagues that are working on the commercial products, right? Because you're just depending on so many external stakeholders in the community, other companies working on the project, other developers working on the project. So that might sometimes be weird, like looking. Well, I guess we're all remote, or largely, or most of EDB is remote. So maybe you're not looking over your shoulder and looking at your colleague that is, working on a much more predictable timeline. But I guess you have conversations still. So yeah, I'm curious how that feels sometimes.
Yeah, again, that's part of the job. And I guess in some sense, this is a self-selecting crowd, right? If you want to be successful in this, you kind of have to figure out how to work in that environment. I think to some degree, it is my job as maybe sort of the more experienced member of the group to coordinate that and give advice on that. And, sometimes when we have internal discussions in the company or someone maybe from the field or product management has a question, and then it's my job to tell them, yeah, okay, that's great. We can totally do that. Or I would say, no, that will run into all of these complications. We can still do it, but we have to then manage these complications and there's risk, and we don't know how it's going to finish and when it's going to finish. And we know, EDB is a Postgres company. Everybody knows that or learns that pretty soon, right? That this is the way it works. And we just have to, sort of build our schedules and our plans around that, we have risks in the plans and we have to manage them.
Yeah, like it just depends on whenever someone has time to do stuff, and you sort of have to work with that, right? Cool. I recently learned that work on the next version already starts in July, so you already know what is in store, somewhat at least, for Postgres 19. I'm curious if there is anything that you've already, like seen and thought of working.
Yeah, Matheus, what are you working on?
Yeah, there's a open discussion on the list already about this, that it's the idea of implementing the qualify clause on Postgres. The qualify clause, it's basically a where clause, but for window functions. So currently, if the user wants to filter the results based on window functions, it needs a subquery to apply the filters, and the qualify enable this without the subquery. So it's basically work like a normal where clause. And there's some discussions about this regarding the it's being standard or not. But yeah, I hope that we can make some progress on this and be on 19. It would be a very interesting feature. And then another one that I think that is would be very interesting is the parallel processing of index in auto vacuum. So it's a very interesting feature that would make auto vacuum faster for some specific tables, so users can enable or not based on the characteristics of each table. So yeah, I'm very looking forward for these features for 19.
Yeah, the qualify clause is also, there's another part of that story. Is me and one of our colleagues is also part of the SQL standard committee, and we're also working on standardizing it there. So there are a couple of other SQL implementations that have it already, and in Postgres we always want to stick to the standard, so we're also trying to put it into the standard at the same time as we're implementing it. So we'll see how that goes. I think this should shake out in the next couple of months.
And so how does this work internally at EDB? Do you just say like, hey, like I want to work on this and this and this, and then that goes into some work tracking something? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, there's a combination of things. I would say there's a combination of things that engineers are interested in because they perceive a technical need or they perceive a user need, and then they propose something on their own. Another is that we observe what primarily our customers or generally the users that maybe should be our customers, right? What kind of things they're interested in potentially, or what they specifically ask for. And then the other bucket is, what does Postgres need in general to be successful in the short term and in the long term? And I guess those, three things perhaps, or, those are three buckets, I guess you could say, right? And then we put them into, we put them in some kind of work tracking document things and sort of pick from there. And then it depends, right? What, different colleagues have different skill sets and interests, and then, we kind of figured out from there who wants to work on what and who can't work on that, and how do we also then combine colleagues so they can review each other's work and so then we just kind of plan that.
Yeah, and of course, like we have some conversations where a patch will take like longer, like several years, or maybe doesn't get merged at all. So if it's clear upfront that this is going to take like a while, is that still an appropriate patch to, or an appropriate piece of work to pick up? That's totally fine.
Yeah, those are hard decisions, right? If you want to work on something big, well, there's two things that are the possibility there, right? It's very big, so you just have to work on it for a long time. Or as we discussed earlier, it's risky, right? And it might get sort of bounced around and have lengthy discussions, and then that's a judgment calls that maybe the senior people in the group have to make, if it's reasonable or if it can be chunked up in some way, or again, you need to build these, sort of relationships with maybe other developers and see how maybe whatever concerns they have can be addressed maybe in some way. And so, those are difficult things then. If they take a really long time, obviously this is difficult for the individual who has to work on it, but also obviously for the company who wants to, obviously ship software at some point. So, but often, we need these things as well. We can't just have, sort of little short projects. We also sometimes need to
not just shiny things.
Yeah.
Important things too. All right, thank you. I think I got it. Is there anything that either of you still wants to make sure that we mention?
I don't think you asked me what I'm working on for Postgres 19.
I didn't? Well, in that case, what are you working on for 19, Peter?
So as I alluded to earlier, I'm trying to contribute to potentially making Postgres multi-threaded. That's a project that other people in the community have suggested, and it has been bouncing around for some time, and I think there's a bit of a consensus now that it could actually happen. So I'm trying to work with a few people from other companies in the Postgres space to make that happen. And it's going to be one of those long ones that we talked about. We have a plan. We have a few very experienced people in that group, and we have a plan to chunk it up and move it forward steadily. So that's what I'm hoping to work on mainly, and then support the rest of the team and committing all their stuff maybe.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, if it's going to be a long running one, maybe we'll have another one of these conversations next year.
We should have something about it, yes.